I'll never forget the way Max stopped that morning. Not a hesitation, not a pause, a complete, bone-deep refusal. His entire body went rigid, every muscle locked, and his eyes, they weren't looking at the tunnel entrance anymore. They were looking through it, into something I couldn't see. We'd been partners for 3 years. I knew his every signal, every twitch of his ear, every shift in his breathing. But this was different. This was primal fear radiating from a dog who'd never backed down from anything. Not collapsed buildings, not raging fires, not the darkest caves during search operations. And now, standing before this abandoned drainage tunnel on the edge of town, he was telling me no. My first instinct was frustration. We had a job to do. Reports of a missing child, and this tunnel was our last lead before nightfall. But Max planted his paws in the dirt and whined, a sound I'd never heard from him before. It cut through me like glass. My heart started racing, and suddenly I wasn't thinking like a canine handler anymore. I was thinking like someone who trusted this dog with my life. I crouched down beside him, my hand trembling as I stroked his head. "What is it, boy? What do you see?" His brown eyes met mine, and I swear I saw something beyond training, beyond obedience. I saw wisdom. I saw warning. Every protocol told me to push forward, but something deeper told me to listen. So I called for backup, requested the structural team, and waited. 20 agonizing minutes that felt like hours. Max never moved from that spot, never took his eyes off that tunnel. When the engineers arrived with their equipment, they found it within minutes. A catastrophic weakness in the tunnel's ceiling, held up by nothing but rust and prayer. One wrong step, one vibration, and the entire thing would have collapsed. On me, on Max, on anyone who'd gone inside searching for answers. The child was found safe 2 hours later, at a friend's house. But as I sat in my truck that evening, Max's head resting on my lap, I couldn't stop shaking. He'd saved my life by refusing to obey. And if you're watching this story, and it touches you the way it still touches me, please subscribe to our channel. Because these moments, these bonds between humans and animals, they deserve to be shared. Max isn't just my partner. He's my guardian angel, with 4 paws, and now I'll never doubt him again. I remember my first day at the K9 Academy like it was yesterday, though it's been 7 years now. I walked in confident, maybe even a little arrogant. I'd spent a decade in law enforcement, worked dozens of cases, earned my badges and commendations. I thought training with a dog would be the easy part. I thought I'd be the one doing the teaching. They paired me with a German shepherd named Luna. She was 2 years old, all lean muscle and intense focus, with eyes that seemed to look straight into your soul. Our instructor, a weathered veteran named Captain Rodriguez, told us something on that first day that I didn't truly understand until much later. He said, "Your dog will know things before you do. Your job isn't to control them. It's to learn their language." I nodded along, but inside I was thinking, sure, but I'm the human here. I'm the one with the training and experience. The first few weeks were humbling. Luna would alert to things I couldn't see, couldn't smell, couldn't sense. During training exercises, she'd stop suddenly during searches, refusing to enter certain areas. Sometimes there were hidden training hazards the instructors had planted. Sometimes there was nothing I could identify at all. And every time I overrode her judgment, every time I urged her forward despite her warnings, I was wrong. There was one exercise that broke through my pride completely. We were doing a mock building search, looking for a hidden suspect. Luna stopped at a doorway, her whole body tense, but not in her usual alert stance. This was different. This was hesitation mixed with something else. Concern, maybe even fear. I checked for obvious dangers. Nothing. I commanded her forward. She refused. My ego kicked in. I thought she was being stubborn, that she needed more discipline. I reached for her lead, ready to push through, when Captain Rodriguez's hand landed on my shoulder. "What is she telling you?" he asked quietly. I wanted to say she wasn't telling me anything, that she was just being difficult. But I stopped. I actually stopped and watched her. Really watched her. Her ears were pinned back. Her breathing was rapid but controlled, and she kept glancing between me and that doorway. Not with defiance, but with urgency. She was pleading with me. Rodriguez sent another team to check the room from a different entrance. Turns out there was an unstable training prop inside that had shifted during the exercise, creating a potential collapse hazard. Luna had sensed something, maybe vibrations, maybe subtle sounds, maybe something beyond human comprehension, that screamed danger. I knelt down beside her that day and apologized. Actually apologized to my dog. And from that moment, everything changed. I stopped trying to be her commander and started trying to be her partner. I learned to read the subtle curve of her spine when she was uncertain, the specific pitch of her bark when she'd found something versus when she was alerting to danger, the way her tail would pause mid-wag when something wasn't quite right. Trust isn't about blind obedience. It's about communication. It's about respecting that Luna's instincts have been honed by millions of years of evolution, while my human logic is just trying to catch up. She experiences the world through senses I'll never fully access, a universe of scents and sounds and subtle energies that paint a picture far more complete than anything my eyes can see. Now, 5 years into our partnership, I trust Luna with my life. More than that, I trust her with the lives of the people we're sworn to protect. When she refuses, I listen. When she alerts, I believe her. When she hesitates, I pause and ask myself what she knows that I don't. The other day, a rookie handler asked me for advice. I told him the same thing Rodriguez told me, but I added something else. I said, "The day you realize your dog is smarter than you in the ways that matter most, that's the day you become a real canine handler." Luna's getting older now. Her muzzle is going gray, and she doesn't move quite as fast as she used to. But those eyes are still sharp, still watchful, still protecting me from dangers I can't see. And when the day comes that she retires, I'll spend the rest of my career trying to honor what she taught me. That sometimes the wisest thing a human can do is simply listen. The call came through at 2:47 in the morning. I remember because I was staring at the clock, unable to sleep, when my phone shattered the silence. A child had wandered away from a camping site in the state forest, 3 years old, missing for 6 hours in near-freezing temperatures. My stomach dropped before I even got out of bed. I'm Sarah, and I've been a search and rescue handler for 9 years. My partner is a bloodhound named Copper, and together we've worked more cases than I can count. But child cases? They're different. They burrow into your heart in a way nothing else does. Because every minute matters. Every second could mean the difference between bringing someone home safe or delivering the worst news a family will ever hear. We arrived at the trailhead by 3:30. The parents were destroyed. You could see it in their hollow eyes, in the way the mother's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She handed me her daughter's pajama top, the one the little girl had been wearing earlier that evening. "Please," was all she could say. Just that one word. But it carried the weight of every parent's worst nightmare. I knelt down and let Copper smell the fabric. His nose worked methodically, processing information I couldn't begin to comprehend. Then his head lifted, his body shifted, and he was on it. We moved into the darkness, my headlamp cutting a narrow path through towering pines. The temperature was dropping, 28 degrees and falling. Copper pulled hard on the lead, his nose to the ground, then to the air, reading a story written in scent molecules. We'd been searching for 40 minutes when he suddenly changed direction, veering off the main trail onto terrain so rough I was stumbling over roots and rocks. My legs were burning, my lungs aching in the cold air, but Copper never slowed. He'd found something. Then he stopped, completely still, in front of a dense thicket of undergrowth near a rocky outcropping, and he did something he only does when he's found his target. He sat down and looked back at me with absolute certainty. I pushed through the branches, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. And there she was, curled up in a tiny ball beneath the overhang, her little body tucked into itself for warmth. She wasn't moving. "Please, God," I whispered, dropping to my knees beside her. I touched her shoulder, and she stirred. She was alive. Hypothermic, barely conscious, but alive. I radioed for medical immediately, stripped off my jacket, and wrapped her in it, holding her small body against mine, trying to transfer whatever warmth I had. She opened her eyes just briefly, looked at Copper, and whispered, "Doggy." That's all. Just one word. But in that moment, it was everything. The medics reached us 12 minutes later. The little girl, Emma was her name, spent 2 days in the hospital but made a full recovery. Copper and I visited her a week later, and when she saw him, her whole face lit up. She wrapped her arms around his neck and wouldn't let go. Her mother stood behind her, crying, and she looked at me with eyes that said everything words couldn't. But that's not the only story. There was Marcus, the elderly man with dementia who'd wandered from his care facility on a winter evening. Copper found him disoriented, but unharmed, sitting by a frozen pond 2 miles away, talking to himself about his late wife. There was Jennifer, the hiker who'd fallen and broken her leg in a ravine, convinced she was going to die there. Copper traced her scent through 3 miles of wilderness to find her 12 hours after she'd gone missing. And then there was the one that still haunts me. The teenager who'd run away after a fight with his parents, convinced nobody cared whether he lived or died. We found him on a bridge, standing on the wrong side of the railing. Copper approached him slowly, gently, and somehow that dog knew to just sit there quietly while I talked the boy back to safety. I don't know what it was. Maybe Copper's calm presence. Maybe the reminder that life and connection still existed. But that young man is alive today. Not every story ends well. I've worked cases where we've found people too late, where all we could offer was closure instead of reunion. Those nights, I go home and hold Copper close, and I let myself cry into his fur. He never judges, never pulls away. He just leans into me, solid and warm and present. People ask me all the time how Copper does it, how he finds people when technology fails and human searchers come up empty. I tell them it's training, instinct, and a sense of smell 40 times more powerful than ours. But honestly, I think it's something more. I think dogs like Copper understand on some primal level that they're doing important work, that they're saving lives, that they matter. Copper is 8 now, middle-aged for a working dog. Every time we get a call, I wonder how many more searches we have together. But I try not to think about that. Instead, I focus on the families we've helped, the lives we've touched, the moments when hope seemed lost, and Copper proved that miracles still exist. Because that's what these dogs are. living, breathing miracles with 4 paws and a heart bigger than anything I've ever known. And I'm just grateful I get to follow where he leads. I used to think I understood dogs. I grew up with them, loved them, considered myself a dog person through and through. But it wasn't until that Tuesday afternoon in September that I realized I'd been missing something crucial all along. I'd been hearing them, but I hadn't been listening. My name is Michael, and I'm a veterinary behaviorist. People bring me their dogs when something's wrong, when their beloved pet suddenly won't eat, won't walk, won't obey commands they've followed for years. That particular Tuesday, a woman named Patricia came into my office in tears, her golden retriever, Bailey, trembling beside her. "He won't go into the basement anymore," she said, her voice cracking. "We've lived in that house for 5 years. His bed is down there, his favorite toys. 3 weeks ago, he just stopped. He plants his feet at the top of the stairs and refuses. I've tried treats. I've tried his favorite ball. I've even tried carrying him. He fights me with everything he has. What's wrong with him?" I looked at Bailey. He wasn't aggressive or scared in the typical sense. He was anxious, yes. But there was something more in his eyes, something that looked almost like determination, like he was trying to protect Patricia from something she couldn't see. "Has anything changed in the house?" I asked. "New appliances, construction, anything unusual?" "Nothing," she insisted. "That's what makes this so frustrating. Everything is exactly the same." I examined Bailey thoroughly. Physically, he was perfectly healthy. His hearing was fine, his vision clear, no signs of pain or illness. But when I showed him a picture of a staircase on my tablet, his entire body tensed. This wasn't random. This wasn't behavioral. This was communication. "Patricia," I said carefully, "I know this might sound strange, but I want you to have your basement thoroughly inspected. Electrical, plumbing, foundation, everything. Before you take Bailey down there again." She looked at me like I was insane. I didn't blame her. But something in my gut told me Bailey was refusing for a reason. And after 15 years of working with animals, I'd learned to trust those instincts. She called me 4 days later. Her voice was shaking, but this time it wasn't from frustration. It was from shock. The inspector had found a significant natural gas leak in the basement, hidden behind the walls. Slow enough that the detectors hadn't caught it yet, but concentrated enough that within another week or two, one spark from the water heater could have caused an explosion. Bailey had smelled it, had sensed the danger, and he'd been trying to tell Patricia the only way he knew how. By refusing to go down there, by refusing to let her go down there. That case changed everything for me. I started looking at refusal differently, not as disobedience or stubbornness, but as language, as dogs trying desperately to communicate something important to the humans they love. There was Duke, the German shepherd, who suddenly refused to let his owner, an elderly man named Robert, go on their usual morning walk. Robert was furious, thought Duke was being lazy or rebellious. Turns out, Duke could sense that Robert was on the verge of a cardiac event. 2 days later, Robert had a heart attack, at home, where paramedics could reach him quickly, instead of 3 miles away on an isolated trail where he walked every morning. Duke had saved his life by breaking routine. There was Sadie, the terrier who wouldn't stop barking at a specific corner of her family's nursery, where their newborn slept. The parents were exhausted, frustrated, ready to rehome her. I convinced them to have that wall checked. They found toxic black mold growing inside, invisible from the outside, but releasing spores that could have severely damaged their baby's developing lungs. Sadie had been sounding the alarm. And then there was the case that broke my heart. A Labrador named Chester, who refused to play fetch anymore, who wouldn't run, who sat and stared at his owner with sad, pleading eyes. The owner thought Chester was depressed or stubborn. By the time they brought him to me, I could feel the mass in his abdomen. Advanced cancer. Chester hadn't been refusing to play because he was disobedient. He'd been in pain, trying to tell them something was wrong. We caught it too late. I think about Chester often. I think about all the times we misinterpret our dogs because we're so focused on obedience and training that we forget they're sentient beings with their own perceptions, their own ways of experiencing the world. A dog's nose has up to 300 million olfactory receptors compared to our 6 million. They can smell chemical changes in our bodies before we feel them. They can hear frequencies we'll never perceive. They can sense shifts in atmospheric pressure, electrical fields, vibrations in the earth. When a dog refuses a command, especially a dog who normally obeys, they're not being stubborn. They're trying to tell us something. Maybe there's danger we can't detect. Maybe they're in pain. Maybe they sense something wrong with us. Maybe the world they're experiencing in that moment is completely different from the one we see. My job now isn't just treating behavioral issues. It's teaching people to listen. Really listen. To watch their dog's body language, to notice changes in behavior, to ask why before assuming disobedience. Last month, Patricia sent me a photo. She's sitting in her renovated basement, which is now safe, with Bailey's head resting on her lap. He's relaxed, content, back to his old self. The caption read, "He knew. He always knew. I just needed to listen." That's the truth I wish every dog owner understood. Your dog isn't trying to frustrate you. They're trying to tell you something. And sometimes, what they're saying could save your life, or theirs. We just have to be willing to listen with more than our ears. We have to listen with trust, with patience, with the understanding that their reality is richer and more complex than ours in ways we're only beginning to understand. Bailey taught Patricia that lesson, and through her, he taught me something too. That refusal isn't always rebellion. Sometimes, it's the deepest form of love. There are moments in life when you realize that words are optional. That connection can exist in silence, in a glance, in the weight of a presence beside you. For me, that realization came on the worst night of my career, when I had nothing left to give, and my partner, a Belgian Malinois named Ranger, reminded me what it means to truly know someone. I'm Detective Jake Morrison, and I've worked with canine units for 12 years. People always ask what it's like having a dog as a partner, and I used to give them the standard answers about training and discipline and teamwork. But that's not really it. That's not even close to what this bond actually is. Ranger came into my life 4 years ago. He was young, intense, full of raw energy that needed direction. I was older, carrying the weight of too many cases, too many faces I couldn't save. We were paired together at the academy, and honestly, I wasn't sure it would work. He was all fire and instinct. I was burned out and going through the motions. But something happened in those first few weeks. We started learning each other. Not commands and responses. That's just mechanics. We learned the deeper language, the one that doesn't need words. I learned that when Ranger's left ear twitched twice, he was processing something complex, weighing options. When his breathing shifted to shallow and rapid, he was on high alert, sensing a threat I hadn't noticed yet. When he leaned his full weight against my leg during briefings, he was telling me he was ready, that we were in this together. And somehow, without me realizing it was happening, Ranger learned me too. He knew when my stress was spiking by the way my hand tensed on his lead. He could sense my frustration before it reached my face. On the days when old cases haunted me, When I'd show up for duty carrying ghosts nobody else could see, Ranger would stay closer than usual, his presence a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone. The night everything changed was a hostage situation. An armed suspect had barricaded himself in a warehouse with 2 employees. Negotiations had failed. SWAT was preparing to breach, and they needed us to clear the secondary entrance, make sure there were no surprises waiting. We entered through the south corridor, Ranger moving ahead of me with that focused intensity I'd come to rely on. The building was a maze of storage units and narrow passages, shadows swallowing our flashlight beams. My heart was hammering. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't identify what. Then Ranger stopped. Not an alert, not a detection stance, just stopped. And he turned his head to look back at me with an expression I'd never seen before. His eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment, I swear we had an entire conversation without a single sound. He was telling me to wait, to trust him, to let him lead. I don't know how I knew that's what he meant, but I did. The same way you know what a loved one is thinking from across a room. The same way you can feel someone's mood shift before they say a word. It was knowledge that lived somewhere deeper than logic. Ranger moved forward 3 steps, then stopped again. His body went rigid. He'd found something, but he didn't give his normal alert signal. Instead, he backed up slowly, deliberately, until he was pressing against my legs, moving me backward with him. That's when I saw the wire, barely visible in the dim light, stretched across the corridor at ankle height. A tripwire connected to something I couldn't see, but knew would be catastrophic. My blood went cold. If Ranger had given his normal alert, sitting at the point of detection like he'd been trained, I would have moved forward to investigate. I would have walked right into it. But somehow, he'd understood. He'd known that this situation required something different, something beyond his training. He'd improvised, communicated in a new way, because the old way would have gotten us both killed. I radioed the bomb squad, and we backed out carefully. They found an improvised explosive device rigged to that wire, powerful enough to collapse that section of the building. The suspect had been military, knew how to set traps. If we'd triggered it, we'd be dead. The SWAT team on the other side of the building would have been trapped. Those hostages would have had no chance. After it was over, after the suspect was in custody, and the hostages were safe, I sat in my patrol car with Ranger in the back. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold my coffee. The adrenaline crash was hitting hard, and with it came the full weight of how close we'd come. Ranger pushed his head through the partition, resting his muzzle on my shoulder. He didn't whine or bark. He just stayed there, breathing steadily, his warmth solid against me. And I broke. I just completely broke down, buried my face in his fur, and let 4 years of accumulated stress pour out. He didn't move, didn't pull away, just held space for me, the way I'd held space for him during thunderstorms and fireworks and all the chaos of our work. In that moment, I wasn't his handler. He wasn't my tool. We were just 2 beings who'd been through hell together and come out the other side. People talk about the bond between handler and K9, but they use words like partnership and teamwork. Those words are too small, too professional. What Ranger and I have is something closer to what people have with their children, their spouses, their closest friends. It's a bond forged in trust so complete that you'd trust them with your life. And in our case, we do, every single day. I know when Ranger is tired by the way his tail sits a 1/4 inch lower. He knows when I'm worried by the rhythm of my footsteps. I can tell when he's caught a scent of interest versus a scent of danger by the exact angle of his head. He can read my intentions before I've fully formed them in my mind. We've developed our own language. A slight shift in my weight means stay alert. His specific bark pattern means threat at 9 o'clock. A touch of my hand on his shoulder means I've got you. His lean against my leg means I know. We're okay. Last week, we had a routine patrol. Nothing dangerous, just checking a warehouse district. Ranger suddenly stopped and looked up at me with soft eyes, then did something he almost never does on duty. He wagged his tail and pressed his head into my hand. No reason, no command, just a moment of pure affection. I realized he was checking on me. I'd been quiet that morning, distracted by personal problems, and somehow he'd sensed it. He was reminding me, in his way, that whatever was wrong, we'd face it together. That's what people don't understand about this bond. It's not about commands and obedience. It's about two souls learning to speak a language that has no words, communicating through presence and trust, and a connection that runs deeper than training could ever reach. Ranger is 7 now. We probably have 2, maybe 3 more years of active duty together before he retires. I try not to think about that day. Try not to imagine what it'll be like to work without him beside me, to face danger without his presence anchoring me to courage. But when that day comes, I know this much. The language we've built together won't fade. It's written too deeply, carved into who I am. He's taught me that the most important conversations happen in silence, and that being truly known by another being, even across species, is one of the greatest gifts life can offer. People see a cop and his dog. What they don't see is the conversation we're always having, the constant exchange of trust and understanding and love that flows between us without a single word ever being spoken. That's the bond. That's what it really means. And I wouldn't trade it for anything in this world. The radio crackled at 4:17 in the morning, pulling me from the kind of sleep you never really settle into when you're on call. We have a structural collapse at the old Morrison apartment complex. Multiple residents unaccounted for. All available search and rescue teams respond immediately. My name is Maria Chen, and I've been a search and rescue coordinator for 14 years. My partner is a border collie named Scout, trained in urban disaster response. We've worked earthquakes, building collapses, industrial accidents, situations where every second counts, and the margin for error is measured in lives. I was dressed and out the door in 4 minutes, Scout already alert and focused in the back of my truck. She knows the sound of that radio tone, knows what it means. By the time we arrived at the scene, the sun was just starting to break over the horizon, illuminating a nightmare. The 5-story building had partially collapsed, the western section folding in on itself like a house of cards. Dust still hung in the air, and you could hear it. That terrible sound of settling debris, of structures that might collapse further at any moment. Residents were scattered on the street in their pajamas, crying, shouting names into the chaos. The fire chief grabbed me the moment I stepped out of my truck. We have at least 6 people still inside, maybe more. The structure is unstable. We can't just send people in there blindly. That's where dogs like Scout become invaluable. While humans see rubble and chaos, search dogs see a 3-dimensional puzzle of scents and air currents. They can detect human scent through concrete and steel, can work in spaces too dangerous or too small for human rescuers. They're not just tools. They're often the difference between life and death. I fitted Scout with her search vest and protective booties. She was vibrating with focus, every muscle coiled and ready. I knelt down, looked into her eyes, and gave her the command. Search. She moved into the debris field like water finding its path, her nose working constantly, reading invisible stories written in scent molecules. I followed behind her, my own safety gear on, watching her body language for the subtle signs that meant she'd found something. The building groaned around us, a sound that made my skin crawl. Engineers were monitoring the structure, but we all knew the truth. This whole thing could come down at any moment. Behind me, I could hear the incident commander arguing with someone about sending more teams in. Too dangerous, he was saying. We needed to wait for structural stabilization. But the people inside didn't have time to wait. Scout stopped suddenly, her entire body going still. Then she began to dig frantically at a pile of concrete and twisted rebar, barking in the specific pattern that meant she'd found someone alive. My heart leaped. "I've got something," I radioed. "Southwest quadrant, approximately 20 feet from the main entrance." The technical rescue team moved in with their equipment: hydraulic spreaders, cutting tools, shoring materials to stabilize the debris as we worked. Every movement had to be calculated. Remove the wrong piece of rubble, and we could trigger another collapse. But Scout had given us a target, a specific location to focus our efforts. It took 43 minutes to reach her. A woman named Diana, trapped in a pocket created when her kitchen table had caught a falling beam. She was conscious, terrified, her leg crushed beneath concrete. But she was alive. Scout had found her in time. As the paramedics worked to stabilize Diana for extraction, Scout was already moving again. She'd done her job, but she wasn't finished. There were more people in there, and she knew it. She led me deeper into the wreckage, through spaces so tight I had to crawl, over debris that shifted beneath my weight with sickening instability. My radio kept crackling with warnings from the structural engineers. Stress readings were climbing. We needed to evacuate. But Scout had another alert, and I had to trust her. This time she found two people, a father and his teenage son, who'd been trapped in their apartment when the floor above them collapsed. They were in bad shape, dehydrated and injured, but they'd survived by finding a space near a broken water pipe. Scout's detection gave the rescue team the exact location, saving precious minutes that could mean the difference between survival and tragedy. We worked for 11 hours that day. Scout found 7 people in total, 7 human beings who might have died in that rubble if we'd waited for the building to be fully stabilized, if we'd relied only on human searchers shouting into the void and hoping for responses. But here's what people don't understand about this work, about what dogs like Scout do. It's not just physically demanding, it's emotionally devastating. Because Scout doesn't just find survivors, she finds everyone. And sometimes, everyone includes people we couldn't save. Late in the afternoon, Scout alerted in a section of the building that had been completely crushed. Her body language was different this time, certain but subdued. She'd found someone, but there was no frantic digging, no urgent barking. She just sat down quietly and looked at me with eyes that somehow seemed sad. She'd found a body. An elderly man who'd been caught in the initial collapse, killed instantly. And Scout knew. Somehow, she understood the difference. She could sense life versus death in ways I'll never fully comprehend. I watched her after that alert, after the recovery team moved in. She was tired, clearly exhausted, but there was something else in her posture. A weight. People think dogs don't understand death, don't feel the emotional toll of this work. But I have done this long enough to know that's wrong. Scout carries something after these deployments. She's quieter for days, stays closer to me, seeks more comfort. The final count was 8 people found. 7 survived, including a 4-year-old girl, Scout, located in the early evening, trapped in what had been her bedroom closet, protected by the structural support of the walls around her. 1 life lost, but 7 saved because a border collie could do what humans and technology couldn't. After the operation ended, after we'd been debriefed and cleared to leave, I sat in my truck with Scout for a long time. She was curled up on the seat beside me, her head on my lap, and I could feel her trembling. Not from cold or fear, but from the sheer exhaustion of what she'd done, of the emotional and physical energy she'd expended. I thought about Diana, the first woman Scout found, who'd cried when she saw my dog's face appear through the debris. "I knew someone would come," she'd said later, "but I didn't know it would be an angel with fur." I thought about the father and son, holding each other when we pulled them out, the father kissing the top of his son's head over and over while paramedics worked on them. I thought about the little girl who'd been so scared and alone in the darkness until Scout's nose appeared through a gap in the rubble, until she heard my voice saying, "We've got you, sweetheart. You're safe now." And I thought about the families of the man we'd found too late, and how even in that tragedy, Scout had given them something: certainty, closure, the ability to lay their loved one to rest with dignity. This is what search and rescue dogs do. They navigate chaos that would paralyze humans. They work in conditions that defy logic and safety protocols. They find needles in haystacks made of concrete and steel and broken lives. And they do it with a dedication that borders on the spiritual. Scout is 9 years old now, nearing the end of her operational career. Soon she'll retire, and I'll get a new partner to train. But I know I'll never have another Scout. She's saved dozens of lives over our years together, given countless families their loved ones back, brought hope to situations that seemed hopeless. People ask me how she does it, how she stays focused in such dangerous conditions, how she knows where to search. I tell them about the training, about the hundreds of hours we've spent building her skills and our communication. But that's only part of the truth. The real answer is something I can't quite articulate. It's in the way Scout looks at me before we enter a disaster site, in the determination that radiates from her small frame, in the way she refuses to give up even when she's exhausted and the odds seem impossible. She does it because she knows it matters, because somewhere in her canine heart, she understands that she's saving lives, that she's giving people second chances, that she's doing something important. Last week, I received a letter from Diana, the woman from the Morrison collapse. She'd fully recovered from her injuries and wanted me to know that she'd named her new puppy, Scout, after the dog who'd saved her life. She included a photo: Diana smiling, healthy, alive, holding a border collie puppy with those same intelligent eyes. I showed the photo to Scout. She sniffed it once, her tail wagging slowly, then looked up at me with an expression that seemed almost proud. And maybe she was. Maybe she understood, in her way, what that photo represented. A life continued, a future granted, a family made whole again because she'd been willing to crawl into the darkness and find hope where there seemed to be none. That's the work. That's what these incredible dogs do every single day. And I'm just honored to follow where they lead. I've always considered myself a logical person, a realist. I'm a civil engineer. I deal in concrete facts, structural calculations, measurable data. I trust what I can see, test, and verify. Or at least, I used to. Before that day in October when my dog taught me that some of the most important truths can't be measured by any instrument we've invented. My name is David, and this is the story of how a scruffy rescue mutt named Charlie saved my daughter's life by knowing something that every piece of technology I had access to completely missed. Charlie came into our lives 3 years ago. My daughter Emma, who was 10 at the time, found him at the shelter, a mixed breed with uncertain parentage, one ear that flopped and one that stood up, and eyes that seemed far too knowing for a dog. She fell in love instantly. I was skeptical. I wanted a predictable breed, something with papers and genetic health guarantees. But Emma's mother had passed away 2 years earlier, and seeing my daughter smile that genuinely for the first time in months made the decision for me. Charlie turned out to be everything I hadn't planned for. Stubborn, quirky, impossibly attached to Emma. Where she went, he went. When she did homework, he laid under her desk. When she slept, he slept at the foot of her bed. It was sweet, if a bit excessive. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in October. Emma was getting ready for school, and Charlie suddenly planted himself in front of her bedroom door. Not aggressive, not barking, just standing there, refusing to let her leave. Emma laughed at first, tried to coax him away. He wouldn't budge. "Dad, Charlie's being weird," she called down to me. I came upstairs, already running late for a site inspection. Charlie was still blocking the doorway, and when I tried to move him, he did something he'd never done before. He growled at me. Not a playful sound, a warning. "Charlie, move. Now." I used my stern voice, the one that usually worked. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he turned and walked back into Emma's room, going directly to the corner near her closet. And he started barking, sharp, insistent barks that echoed through the house. Emma and I exchanged confused looks. I was frustrated now, worried about being late, convinced the dog was just having some kind of behavioral episode, but something in Charlie's intensity made me pause. I walked over to the corner he was focused on. "What is it, boy? What's wrong?" He pawed at the wall, his barking becoming more frantic. The wall looked completely normal to me. Fresh paint from our renovation last year, no visible cracks or damage. But Charlie was acting like the house was on fire. "Maybe there's a mouse or something in the wall," Emma suggested, though she looked uncertain. I was about to dismiss the whole thing when I noticed Charlie's behavior more carefully. He wasn't exhibiting prey drive, the excited, scattered energy dogs get when they've detected a small animal. This was different. This was focused alarm. And he kept looking back at Emma, then at the wall, then at Emma again, like he was trying to tell us something. Against my better judgment, or maybe because of some instinct I didn't know I had, I called in late to work and contacted a home inspector. He arrived 2 hours later, probably thinking I was crazy for an emergency call about a barking dog. But he humored me. He pulled out his moisture meter and thermal imaging camera and started scanning the wall. Nothing unusual registered. "Mr. Patterson, I'm not detecting any moisture, no temperature anomalies. Structure seems sound." Charlie barked again, sharp and insistent. The inspector jumped slightly, then actually looked at the dog. "Where exactly is he focused?" I pointed to the specific section of wall. The inspector moved his equipment there, scanning more carefully, adjusting his settings. Then his expression changed. "Huh, that's odd." "What?" "There's a temperature differential here, but it's very subtle. Wouldn't have caught it on my standard scan." He pulled out a different instrument, a gas detector, moved it along the wall. The readings jumped. "Mr. Patterson, I'm detecting carbon monoxide inside the wall cavity." My blood went cold. Carbon monoxide, the silent killer. Colorless, odorless, undetectable by humans. Our CO detector in the hallway hadn't registered anything. We'd checked it just last month. The inspector called the gas company immediately. They arrived within 30 minutes, and what they found made me physically sick. There was a crack in the heating vent inside the wall, a tiny fissure from settling that had occurred during our renovation. It was leaking carbon monoxide directly into Emma's room at levels that were building slowly but steadily. The bedroom CO detector that should have caught it? Malfunctioning, despite showing a green light. The hallway detector? Too far away, with the door typically closed at night, to register the localized leak. Another few weeks of running the heat, the technician told me, his face grim, and the concentration in this room overnight would have been lethal. Maybe sooner. I had to sit down. Emma's room, where she slept every night, where Charlie slept at the foot of her bed, closer to that wall than she was. How did... I started to ask, but I already knew. I was looking at how. Charlie sat beside Emma, who had her arms wrapped around his neck, tears streaming down her face as the reality sank in. Dogs can detect carbon monoxide at concentrations far below what human technology can register. Their olfactory system is so sensitive that they can smell chemical compounds we can't even imagine. But more than that, and this is the part that still gives me chills, Charlie had understood the danger. Not just detected it, but comprehended that it threatened Emma. He'd refused to let her go into that room, had alerted us in the only way he could. My daughter, my logical brain, my engineering instruments, our safety detectors, none of us had known. But Charlie knew. The repairs took 3 days. During that time, Emma stayed in the guest room, and Charlie never left her side. He'd done his job, saved her life, and now he was back to just being her devoted companion. Except, I couldn't look at him the same way anymore. I'd spent my entire career trusting instruments and data. I'd built my understanding of the world on measurable facts. And yet, here was this mutt with an uncertain background, no fancy papers or pedigree, who'd detected a threat that every piece of technology in my house had missed. It made me rethink everything. How often do we dismiss animal behavior as random or emotional when they're actually perceiving real threats? How much do our pets know that we're completely oblivious to? I started researching and found story after story. Dogs detecting cancer in their owners before any medical test showed abnormalities. Cats acting strangely before earthquakes. Animals evacuating areas hours before tsunamis struck. There's a whole world of perception happening around us that we're completely blind to, but our animals are tuned into it constantly. 2 months after the carbon monoxide incident, Charlie started acting oddly again, following me everywhere, pawing at my chest, whining when I climbed stairs. I'd been having what I thought was indigestion, nothing serious. But Charlie's behavior reminded me that he'd earned my trust in ways my own judgment hadn't. I went to the doctor. They found a cardiac arrhythmia that could have led to a serious event if left untreated. Charlie had detected the chemical changes in my body, the subtle differences in my scent or behavior that signaled something was wrong. Emma jokes now that Charlie is our family's early warning system. But she's not really joking, and neither am I. We've learned to pay attention when he acts unusual, to trust that his perception of the world includes information we simply don't have access to. Last week, I was at a construction site reviewing plans when one of the workers mentioned his dog had been acting scared of their basement. Everyone laughed. The guy looked embarrassed. I didn't laugh. "Have you had it checked?" I asked. "Structural integrity, gas lines, electrical, everything?" He looked surprised. "It's just the dog being weird." I told him about Charlie, about Emma's room and that wall and how close we'd come to tragedy. "Just have it checked," I said. "Trust me." "Hui." He called me 3 days later. They'd found a significant foundation crack that was allowing radon gas to seep in. Dangerous levels that would have caused serious health issues over time. His dog had been trying to tell him, "I don't consider myself a spiritual person. I still believe in engineering and science and measurable data. But I also now believe that our instruments are primitive compared to the biological sensors that millions of years of evolution have created. Dogs can detect parts per trillion of certain compounds. They can hear frequencies we'll never perceive. They can sense electromagnetic changes, pressure shifts, chemical signatures that are completely invisible to us and our technology. We've spent centuries developing sophisticated tools to understand the world, and we should be proud of that. But maybe we should also be humble enough to recognize that sometimes the most sophisticated detector in the room has 4 legs and a wet nose. Charlie is sleeping at my feet right now as I write this. Emma's at soccer practice. Charlie wanted to stay with me today, which probably means nothing. Or maybe it means something, and I should pay attention. That's the thing I've learned. I don't always understand what he knows or how he knows it, but I've learned to listen, to trust, to recognize that there are truths in this world that can't be measured by instruments, but can be known by beings whose senses extend into realms we're only beginning to understand. My daughter is alive because a scruffy rescue dog knew something that every piece of human technology in our house missed. And that's a fact I can measure in the most important way possible, in heartbeats and laughter and the future Emma still has ahead of her. Sometimes, the most advanced technology in the world is the wet nose of a dog who loves you enough to refuse to let you walk into danger. And sometimes, the smartest thing an engineer can do is trust what he doesn't understand. I'll never forget the moment I realized my phone was useless. We were standing at the entrance of the collapsed mine shaft, and every piece of technology we had — thermal imaging, ground-penetrating radar, acoustic sensors — was telling us there was no one alive down there. The readings were clear. The data was definitive. But my search dog, a German shepherd named Atlas, was telling me something completely different. I'm Rebecca, a mine rescue specialist, and that day taught me that sometimes a dog's nose is worth more than $1 million of equipment. The mine collapse had happened 18 hours earlier. 4 workers were trapped. Our sensors showed no heat signatures, no movement, no signs of life. The incident commander was ready to call it a recovery operation instead of a rescue. Atlas had other ideas. He pulled toward the secondary shaft with an intensity I'd never seen, whining and pawing at the ground. Every instrument said he was wrong, but his nose was reading something our machines couldn't. Trace amounts of breath, skin cells, human scent carried through tiny fissures in the rock. I fought for permission to follow his lead. We diverted resources to the shaft Atlas indicated. 37 hours later, we found all 4 men alive in an air pocket our technology had completely missed. The engineers were baffled. The equipment had failed, but Atlas hadn't. His biological sensors, honed by millions of years of evolution, had detected what our most advanced instruments couldn't. Sometimes nature's technology beats human innovation. Sometimes the smartest thing we can do is trust the 4-legged expert who sees a world we can't even imagine. Atlas saved 4 lives that day simply by knowing what our machines didn't. The headline read, "Local Dog Discovers Hidden Historical Treasure." But that barely scratched the surface of what my border collie, Pip, had actually found that summer afternoon in our backyard. I'm Thomas, an amateur historian, and I'd been metal detecting in our yard for weeks, finding nothing but bottle caps and old nails. My expensive detector had covered every inch. The ground had been thoroughly scanned. But Pip kept digging in one specific spot, ignoring my commands to stop. Frustrated, I finally grabbed a shovel to prove there was nothing there. 3 feet down, I hit something solid. A metal box that somehow my detector had missed. Inside were letters from the Underground Railroad, documents historians had believed were lost forever. Artifacts worth preserving, stories worth telling. The local museum curator was stunned. "How did your equipment miss this?" she asked. It didn't, I admitted. My dog found it. Pip had detected something, maybe the scent of old leather and paper, maybe ground disturbance from settling, that thousands of dollars of technology couldn't register. While I'd been trusting machines, my dog had been reading the earth itself. Now, whenever I search, Pip comes along. Because sometimes the best discoveries aren't made with expensive equipment. They're made by paying attention to a dog who knows something you don't. They called it the biggest drug bust in state history. Over $2 million worth of narcotics hidden in a shipping container among thousands of others at the port. The media praised our K-9 unit, our training, our success rate. But I knew the real story, and it had nothing to do with our methods. I'm Officer Sandra Martinez, and my K-9 partner is a beagle named Biscuit. That day, we were doing routine inspections with 3 other K-9 teams. We had intelligence, we had patterns, we had profiles of which containers to target. Biscuit had different ideas. She pulled away from our planned route, dragging me toward a container that wasn't even on our list. One that had passed every scanner, every customs check, every protocol we had. I tried redirecting her. She refused, planted herself, and wouldn't move. My supervisor was annoyed. Martinez, stick to the plan. But something in Biscuit's body language made me insist. Just let me check this one. Inside, hidden behind a false wall that X-rays hadn't detected, was the largest cache we'd ever found. Biscuit's nose had identified chemical signatures masked by layers of interference designed to fool both dogs and machines. The smugglers had beaten our technology, but they hadn't beaten nature. Biscuit's 220 million scent receptors had detected what our million-dollar scanners missed. That's the day I stopped trusting equipment more than my partner. Because the best technology we have still has 4 legs and knows things we never will.